In 2024, a beloved actor vanished from public life. Not because of scandal, not because of failure, but because of a decision that shocked Hollywood and left fans searching for answers. Clifton Powell, the man who made us laugh in major films, the father, the mentor, walked away from everything. What happened behind closed doors that made him choose a life away from cameras forever? And why did the industry go silent? It happened quietly. No announcement. No farewell tour. No emotional Instagram post. One day, Clifton Powell was everywhere. Social media, casting calls, industry events. The next day, he simply wasn't. Friends couldn't reach him. Agents got no response. Studios looking to cast him found only silence. Hollywood isn't used to people leaving. Usually actors fade away because they can't find work anymore. They disappear into obscurity, chasing smaller roles, doing regional theater, hoping for one last chance. That's not what happened here. Powell had options. He had respect. He had offers on the table. Yet he chose to erase himself completely. The timing was brutal. He was at a point in his career where most actors would sacrifice everything for another shot. After decades of character roles, the funny friend, the boss, the mentor figure, Powell had finally started landing bigger parts. He was relevant. He was working consistently. He was in demand. Then he walked away from it all. What makes this story haunting is what came next. Silence. Not the polite silence of a retired celebrity who occasionally does interviews. This was different. Powell didn't just step back from acting. He stepped back from life as the world knew it. No sightings. No updates. No, he's working on passion projects, narratives that celebrities usually spin. Just gone. The industry whispered. Fans created theories. Social media exploded with speculation. Had he experienced a breakdown? Did he lose his fortune? Was there a family crisis? A health scare? An addiction battle? Nothing official ever came. No statement. No explanation. Just the cold reality that Clifton Powell had made a choice, and that choice was final. He was saying goodbye forever, not just to acting, but to the entire machinery of celebrity itself. And the most disturbing part? Some people close to him say they understand exactly why. Before the disappearance, there was a man, a talented man, a hardworking man, someone who built a career brick by brick, role by role, not through scandal or luck, but through pure skill and determination. Clifton Powell was born in 1956 in New Orleans. He grew up in a city drowning in culture, music, and storytelling. Louisiana shaped him. The South shaped him. He learned early that survival meant knowing how to read people, how to make them laugh, how to defuse tension with charm. These weren't just personality traits. They were survival tools. And Powell became a master at wielding them. He started in theater, off-Broadway productions, small stages where nobody was watching, but everybody was listening. Powell was the guy who could steal a scene with a single glance. Directors noticed. Casting agents started calling. By the 1990s, he was everywhere. Television shows, film bit parts, character roles that made audiences lean forward in their seats. But Powell wasn't chasing stardom the way other actors do. He wasn't grinding for the lead role. He understood something fundamental about Hollywood that many never figure out. The character actor has power. The person who shows up, delivers brilliance in 5 minutes, and makes the whole film better. That person is gold. Studios want them. Directors beg for them. And they have freedom that leading actors never get. Powell appeared in major films. Two can play that game. Hustle and Flow. Ray. He was in comedies and dramas. He mentored younger actors. He became known as a professional, someone who showed up prepared, who elevated everyone around him, who never complained. In an industry built on ego and selfishness, Powell was different. By 2020, something shifted. He started landing bigger roles. Netflix productions, streaming series, the kind of work that suggested his career was entering a new phase. After 3 decades of grinding, recognition was finally coming. Money was secure. Legacy was being built. Everything an actor dreams about seemed within reach. Then he saw something, or experienced something, or realized something that changed everything. The exact moment is unclear. Powell never explained it publicly. But those close to him saw the change happening in real time. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't one bad audition or one failed film. It was slower than that. Quieter. More devastating. Sources suggest it started with exhaustion, not the normal tiredness actors feel after long shoots. This was different. This was spiritual exhaustion, the kind that comes when you've spent decades performing, and you suddenly realize you don't recognize yourself anymore. Every role bleeds into the next. Every character becomes a mask, and one day you wake up and can't remember which version of you is real. Powell began talking to people close to him about burnout. Not in interviews. He was too private for that. But in conversations with friends, family, people he trusted. He talked about the fakeness, the constant performing, not just on camera, but off camera too. The networking, the smiling, the self-promotion, the endless auditions where you're told you're not quite right, not quite marketable, not quite what they're looking for. Even successful actors live with that rejection echoing in their heads. But there was something else, something deeper. Powell started questioning the entire machine itself. Why was he chasing roles? For money? He had enough. For prestige? The industry already respected him. For legacy? He'd already built one. So, what was he actually chasing? And more importantly, what was it costing him? Friends noticed he became withdrawn. The man who could light up a room with his presence started turning down social events. He stopped attending industry parties. He skipped award shows. He turned down meetings with producers who wanted to develop projects with him. It wasn't rudeness. It was clear intention. Powell was making a statement without saying a word. I'm done. Then came the projects he turned down. A major streaming series. A film with significant financing. Roles that would have cemented his status as a respected character actor for the rest of his life. He said no to all of it. When agents pushed back, when producers called personally, when friends asked why he was throwing away opportunities, Powell gave them the same answer. He was finished. The breaking point wasn't one moment. It was the accumulation of decades finally becoming unbearable. And Powell decided he would rather disappear than continue living a life that wasn't his own. Hollywood has a narrative it loves to tell about actors who leave. They burned out. They had addiction problems. They experienced a breakdown. They lost their relevance and quietly faded away. These stories make sense to the industry because they fit a pattern. They're comfortable. They don't challenge anything. But Powell's departure doesn't fit that pattern. And that's why nobody talks about it. The industry doesn't want to confront what Powell's exit represents. Because if one of the hardest working, most respected character actors in Hollywood, a man with consistent work, financial security, and genuine respect from his peers, can look at the system and say this isn't worth it, then the entire machinery starts to look questionable. Other actors might start asking the same questions. Other people might start walking away. And that's dangerous for a system built on keeping people trapped. So the silence serves a purpose. It's erasure by agreement. Powell is allowed to leave quietly as long as he doesn't explain why. As long as he doesn't become a cautionary tale. As long as he doesn't inspire others to ask uncomfortable questions about what the entertainment industry actually demands from its people. What they're not telling us is that Powell's disappearance was an act of resistance. Not loud resistance. He's not on podcasts talking about corruption or exploitation. He's not writing op-eds about Hollywood's toxic culture. He's doing something more powerful. He's living proof that the system isn't worth the cost. That there's a life beyond the cameras. That walking away is possible, even when you're successful, even when you have everything supposedly figured out. Friends who've stayed in touch report that Powell is genuinely happy. Not the performed happiness of social media. Real happiness. He's reading more, spending time with family, working on personal projects that have nothing to do with being watched or judged or monetized. He's discovered a version of himself that exists independent of applause. But here's what haunts the industry. Powell never needed to make a statement. He just needed to leave. And his absence speaks louder than any manifesto ever could. It raises a question that terrifies Hollywood. What if other people realize what he realized? What if the performance isn't worth the price? The industry can't answer that question honestly. So it pretends Powell never existed. The moment came sometime in 2023. Powell made a choice that was absolute, irrevocable, and final. He wasn't going to take another role. He wasn't going to audition. He wasn't going to keep one foot in the industry while exploring other options. He was walking out completely. This wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't a break that might end someday. It was a door closing forever. What made this decision so radical wasn't just that Powell was leaving acting. Thousands of actors leave every year. What made it radical was that Powell was walking away from a successful career. Not a struggling one, not a fading one. A career that was still producing opportunities, still generating income, still offering the possibility of bigger roles and recognition. He had everything an actor spends decades chasing, and he chose to abandon it all. The logistics of this decision were complex. There were contracts to consider, agents to notify, studios that had him in their pipeline, professional obligations that don't simply disappear when you decide you're done. But Powell navigated it all with the same quiet determination he'd shown throughout his career. He did the work. He made the calls. He closed the doors himself, methodically and completely. People asked him to reconsider. They offered compromises. Maybe he could do one film a year, maybe just voice acting, maybe producing, maybe directing. There were countless ways to stay connected to the industry without the full weight of being an active performer. Powell said no to all of it, not because he was angry, but because he understood that any connection, any foothold, any possibility of return would keep him trapped. The only way out was out completely. This is what separates Powell's decision from typical retirement. Most actors who leave the industry maintain relationships. They show up at events. They do guest appearances. They stay tethered to the world they're leaving. Powell cut the cord entirely. Not bitterly. Not dramatically. Just cleanly. Completely. Finally. Friends say he seemed lighter after making the decision. Like he'd been carrying something heavy for decades. And finally he was allowed to put it down. The performance could end. The mask could come off. The person underneath could finally breathe. But the finality of it terrified people in his life, because it meant there would be no comeback story, no redemption arc where Powell eventually returns, no moment where the industry gets to claim him back and celebrate his return. This wasn't a temporary exit. This was goodbye, and Powell meant it. Where does a man go when he leaves everything behind? Powell went home. Not to some mansion in the hills where celebrities pretend to have normal lives while paparazzi circle outside. He went genuinely home. Back to the South. Back to people who knew him before the cameras. Back to a life where nobody cared that he'd been in films or television shows. Where he was just Clifton. Not Clifton Powell, the actor. Just Clifton. What's remarkable about Powell's post-Hollywood life is how thoroughly ordinary it appears to be. He reads. He spends time with family. He walks. He thinks. He exists without documentation, without performance, without the constant need to be on. For someone who spent 4 decades in an industry that measures worth in eyeballs and ratings and social media engagement, this simplicity must feel revolutionary. Reports from people who've encountered him describe someone at peace. Not the performed peace of a celebrity pretending to enjoy retirement. Actual peace. The kind that comes from alignment between your life and your values. Powell is no longer performing for anyone. He's no longer chasing anything. He's no longer wondering if his career choices were the right ones. He knows they were, because he knows who he is without the industry telling him. But his life after Hollywood represents something else too. It's a quiet rebellion against the cult of celebrity. In a world obsessed with fame, relevance, and constant visibility, Powell chose invisibility. In a culture that measures success by how many people know your name, Powell chose obscurity. In an industry that demands you stay relevant or disappear, Powell chose to disappear voluntarily, on his own terms. This decision has real consequences for Powell. He's no longer building a legacy through his work. He's no longer part of cultural conversations. He's no longer relevant in the way that keeps actors' names alive. 20 years from now, younger generations may not know who Clifton Powell was. The roles he played will fade into obscurity. The films he elevated will be rewatched without people remembering his contribution. He accepted this erasure willingly. And that acceptance is profound, because it means Powell values his actual life more than his legacy, more than his place in film history, more than being remembered. He chose the thing that matters most, being real, being present, being free over everything else the industry could offer. He traded immortality for peace. And by all accounts, it was the best trade he ever made. The question lingers in the minds of fans, producers, and industry insiders. Will Clifton Powell ever return? The answer is no. And understanding why requires understanding something fundamental about what Powell experienced. When an actor takes a break and then returns, it's usually because they solved something. They went to therapy. They took time to heal. They found balance. They realized they could make it work with better boundaries. These are the comeback stories Hollywood loves because they suggest the system is fine. People just needed to adjust themselves to fit it better. Powell didn't come back because he didn't solve a problem with himself. He solved a problem with the system. And you can't unsee that truth once you see it. The entertainment industry operates on a specific premise. Your worth is determined by your marketability. How many people want to watch you? How much money can you generate? How relevant are you right now? This metric applies to everyone, A-list stars and character actors alike. You're only valuable if you're producing value for someone else. The moment you stop being useful to the machine, you stop mattering. Powell spent decades inside this machine. He was good at it. He thrived by many measures. But at some point, he realized that no amount of success within this system would ever make him feel genuinely successful. Because success in Hollywood isn't actually about artistic fulfillment or creative expression or meaningful work. It's about numbers, ratings, box office, relevance. It's about being wanted by the market. Once you understand that, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to pretending your work matters for reasons beyond profit. You can't unsee how the system reduces human beings to assets. You can't unfeel the emptiness of chasing validation from an industry that will discard you the moment you're no longer useful. This is why Powell won't return. Not because he's hurt or bitter. Not because he needs more time. But because returning would mean accepting the premise again. It would mean agreeing to play the game. And he's already decided the game isn't worth playing. There's also the matter of dignity. Powell made a statement by leaving completely. If he came back, even for one role, even for a project he genuinely believed in, it would undo that statement. It would suggest his convictions weren't real, that he just needed a break, that he's still available if the right opportunity comes along. Powell won't do that to himself. He won't corrupt the integrity of his exit by hedging his bets. Friends close to him have reportedly asked if he misses it. The answer appears to be no. Not the work itself. Powell was a craftsman who took pride in his performances. But the entire ecosystem, the constant performing, the need to stay relevant, the trading of authenticity for opportunity, he doesn't miss any of that. He's relieved to be free from it. So Powell will not return. Not in 5 years. Not in 10. Not for a legacy project or a dream role or an offer too good to refuse. Because he's already refused the biggest offer of all. The offer to keep performing for an audience that will never actually know him. He chose something better. He chose himself. Clifton Powell's filmography doesn't disappear just because he did. The roles remain. The performances endure. But now they mean something different. When you watch Powell's work now, really watch it, paying attention, you see a man who is always slightly detached from the machine. He was present in every scene. He delivered every line with precision and heart. But there was something in his eyes, a distance, a part of him that was always observing, always questioning, always holding something back. It wasn't a flaw in his acting. It was the mark of an artist who was never fully surrendering to the system. In retrospect, Powell's legacy isn't about the size of his roles or the number of films he appeared in. It's about what his departure reveals. He proved something that the industry doesn't want acknowledged. You can be successful in this business and still recognize it's fundamentally broken. You can gain everything Hollywood promises and still walk away. You can be respected, employed, and relevant and still choose something else. That's dangerous to the system because it suggests there are values higher than fame, that there are forms of success the industry can't quantify, that some people are willing to trade everything for authenticity. Powell's younger colleagues, actors who watched him work, who respected his craft, who saw how he conducted himself with integrity, they're the ones truly affected by his departure. Some of them are starting to ask the same questions he asked. Some are setting boundaries the industry told them were impossible. Some are choosing smaller roles, independent projects, work that feeds their souls rather than feeds the algorithm. Powell didn't write a manifesto. He didn't need to. His exit was the message. For film history, Powell will be remembered as a talented character actor who appeared in significant films during the late 20th and early 21st centuries. His performances will be studied in acting classes. Film critics will note his contributions to ensemble casts. But that's the surface legacy. The deeper legacy is this. Clifton Powell walked away, and he was happy. He traded immortality for peace, relevance for authenticity, and a place in history for a life that was actually his own. He proved that the performance doesn't have to be forever, that you can step off the stage and the world continues. That walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's the only intelligent choice. And maybe that's the most important thing an artist can teach, knowing when to stop. Clifton Powell's story isn't really about Clifton Powell. It's about a system that demands everything from people and offers hollow rewards in return. Hollywood operates on an ancient principle. Artists exist to serve audiences and generate profit. This principle is so deeply embedded that most people in the industry don't even question it anymore. It's just how things work. You pursue your craft. You chase success. You build your brand. You stay relevant. You perform until you can't perform anymore. This is the narrative everyone accepts. But what if that narrative is a trap? Powell recognized something that most artists never allow themselves to see. The industry doesn't care about you. It cares about what you produce. The moment you're no longer productive, either because you're no longer marketable or because you've chosen to stop producing, you become disposable. Studios move on. Audiences forget. Your relevance evaporates. The machine grinds forward without you. Most actors make peace with this. They accept it as the price of admission. They tell themselves that the work is worth it, that the art justifies the cost, that leaving a legacy matters more than living an authentic life. Powell disagreed, and his disagreement was so fundamental that he couldn't compromise. What's happening now is subtle but significant. Other artists are watching. Other performers are questioning. Other people trapped in systems that demand constant output and constant performance are wondering if there's another way. Powell didn't create a movement. He didn't write a book. He just left. And his absence is speaking to people in ways that words never could. The entertainment industry is built on the assumption that artists will always want to be part of it. That no matter how exhausted you get, no matter how much of yourself you sacrifice, you'll keep coming back because you need to be seen, you need to be validated, you need to matter. Powell proved that assumption wrong. He walked away, and he didn't look back. He found meaning and purpose outside the industry's framework. This terrifies the system, because if artists start realizing they don't need the industry, that they can build meaningful lives without chasing fame or relevance or legacy, the entire machinery becomes vulnerable. The power dynamic shifts. Suddenly, artists have options beyond compliance. Powell's final act wasn't a performance. It was a statement, not through words, but through absence. And that absence is louder than anything he could have said. The question his departure poses to every artist still trapped in the system is simple. What are you willing to sacrifice for a life that's actually yours? Powell already answered it. He was willing to sacrifice everything. And in doing so, he gained the only thing that actually matters, himself.